Ethan Caldwell's mansion sat atop a hill on the outskirts of New York, a masterpiece of glass and marble architecture that shimmered under the sunset like a jewel nestled among the trees. But when the carved oak double doors opened, the air inside was cold, not from the temperature, but from the emptiness of the vast hallways where Ethan's footsteps echoed like a reminder of solitude. He stood on the white marble staircase, hands in the pockets of his bespoke suit, his deep blue eyes sweeping across the ballroom below, where the event team was busy preparing for the annual charity gala. Their whispers, the planners, waitstaff, and floral designers stopped when Ethan appeared. It was a familiar reflex, as if his presence alone, a tall white American man with dark brown hair streaked with silver, could still the air itself. Ethan was used to it. 12 years as one of the wealthiest men in America, with a tech empire stretching from Silicon Valley to Wall Street, had taught him that people either wanted something from him or feared him. No one truly saw the man behind the billions, the boy who once grew up in suburban Ohio, dreaming of changing the world with lines of code. Today, the ballroom sparkled with high-hanging crystal chandeliers, casting glittering reflections on the polished marble floor. White orchid arrangements were meticulously placed on banquet tables, draped in gold-embroidered silk, ready to welcome the most powerful guests: governors, senators, Hollywood stars, and Fortune 500 CEOs. This was the biggest charity event of the year, where millions of dollars would be raised for the Children's Hospital. But Ethan knew the real reason they came. Not out of compassion, but because standing under Ethan Caldwell's lights was a way to strengthen their image and power. He descended the staircase slowly, each step steady, like the heartbeat of a man who had mastered the art of emotional restraint. Below, the team resumed their tasks, but their eyes followed him furtively, their forced smiles never quite reaching their eyes. Ethan didn't blame them. He had built an invisible wall around himself, a layer of protection forged from betrayals, broken relationships, and sensational headlines about his private life. But that wall, however strong, had become suffocating, as if he were living in a prison of his design. "Mr. Caldwell, the guest list needs your final approval," came the calm voice of Marcus, the head of security, pulling Ethan from his thoughts. Marcus, a tall man with salt and pepper hair, slid a tablet across the ebony table in the corner of the room. Ethan picked it up, scrolling through the familiar names: Senator Roberts' actress Lila Monroe, and energy conglomerate CEO Theodore Langston. Each name represented a potential deal, a strategic alliance, or a silent war for power. None of them were coming for Ethan the man, but for Ethan Caldwell, the symbol of wealth and influence. He sighed and set the tablet down. "Go ahead with it, Marcus. Thank you." His voice was flat, revealing nothing. Marcus nodded and left, leaving Ethan alone in the vast space. He looked out through the large window, where the golden light of dusk painted the treetops, and felt a nameless void in his chest. Though this gala would raise millions, it was just another performance where he would stand among the crowd, exchanging hollow pleasantries about stocks and real estate, while loneliness gnawed at him from within. "Mr. Caldwell, who will you be bringing to the gala this year?" A gentle but firm voice spoke behind him, startling Ethan. He turned to find Sophia Brooks, his executive assistant, standing in the doorway. Sophia, a Black American woman with warm brown skin and intelligent dark eyes, always appeared flawlessly and professionally at the right moment. Her natural curls were pulled into a low bun, and her navy blue work dress hugged her slender frame, simple yet elegant. In 5 years of working for Ethan, she had organized every aspect of his life, from packed schedules to international meetings, with remarkable efficiency. Sophia was a rare constant in Ethan's turbulent world, someone money couldn't buy. Although asked every year, her question caught Ethan off guard this time. He looked into her eyes, searching for some hint, but saw only the usual respect and caution. No one, Sophia, he replied, his voice devoid of emotion, though his gaze lingered on her longer than usual. Something in the way she stood calm and confident made him wonder if she had ever thought of him as a man, not just her boss. Sophia nodded, revealing no reaction. "I'll follow up with the decorators one last time, sir. Let me know if you need anything." She turned her steps light yet resolute, leaving Ethan with a hollow feeling he couldn't quite name. He watched her figure disappear beyond the doorway, and a question stirred inside him for the first time, one he had never dared to ask. Of all the people around him, was there anyone who truly saw him, not as billionaire Ethan Caldwell, but as Ethan, a man with unspoken dreams and hidden fears? As the last light of sunset faded into darkness, Ethan stood alone in the ballroom. The crystal chandeliers lit his face, but they could not warm the coldness in his soul. The gala would be another success like every year, but he knew that when the lights dimmed, he would return to his silence. And for the first time in many years, that thought felt unbearable. Night fell, cloaking Ethan Caldwell's mansion in a velvet darkness, pierced only by the brilliant golden glow spilling from its tall windows. Ethan sat alone in his private office on the 3rd floor, the desk lamp casting light on his sharply defined features and deep blue eyes, now clouded with fatigue. In front of him sat a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid swirling in the crystal tumbler. But he didn't drink. He held the glass tightly, as if it were the only thing keeping him grounded, amidst the thoughts spinning in his mind. Just a few days away, the charity gala was a responsibility Ethan had fulfilled like a machine for over a decade. But tonight, something within him had shifted. Perhaps it was the sunset he had seen from the ballroom window. Or maybe it was Sophia Brooks' seemingly casual question, "Who will you be bringing to the gala this year, sir?" That question, though familiar, pierced the armor he had carefully built around himself. No one. His answer echoed in his mind, not just as a fact, but as a confession of the emptiness he had long tried to ignore. Ethan rose and walked toward the large window that overlooked the dark garden. The rose bushes meticulously tended by his gardening team were now vague silhouettes. He wondered when was the last time he had truly felt connected to someone, not the business partners with their polished smiles, nor the women who had once accompanied him to events only to disappear when they realized he couldn't give them what they truly wanted, not money, but his heart. 12 years of success had made him a symbol, but at the cost of his ability to trust, to let anyone pass the invisible wall he had built. A hushed voice in the hallway pulled him out of his thoughts. The office door was slightly ajar, and the voice of Mrs. Margaret, his longtime housekeeper, rang out gentle but precise. "Poor man," she told another staff member, likely the new young gardener. "It has everything in the world, but no one to share it with. Money can't buy happiness, can it?" A soft laugh responded. "Sure doesn't buy a smile. He always looks like he's attending a funeral." Ethan set the whiskey down on the desk, the clink of glass on wood sharp and piercing. Though not ill-intentioned, their words touched a hidden wound he rarely acknowledged. Is that how they saw him? A lonely billionaire. A man with a cold face and a frozen heart. He moved to the desk, picked up his phone and scanned his contacts. Hundreds of names appeared: executives, politicians, lawyers, old friends from college, but not one felt like someone he could call right now for no reason to talk to as a friend. His finger stopped on a name: Sophia Brooks. Sophia is a Black American woman who has managed his life for 5 years with the precision of a Swiss watch. She scheduled meetings, handled crises, and even remembered that he liked his coffee black, no sugar. She was the only person who had never asked for anything from him other than respect, and he had always responded by treating her as a valued colleague, not just an assistant. But tonight, as her image came to mind, her neatly tied curls, her intelligent dark eyes that always lit up when solving a complex issue, Ethan felt something different, a stirring he couldn't explain. Before he could overthink it, he pressed the call button. The phone rang twice before Sophia's warm but cautious voice answered. "Mr. Caldwell, is something wrong?" Her tone showed a hint of surprise. He rarely called at this hour. Ethan drew a deep breath, realizing he wasn't prepared for what he was about to say. "Sophia," he began, his voice slightly unsteady. "I'd like to invite you to the gala, not as my assistant, but as my guest." Silence. The pause stretched long enough that Ethan feared she had hung up. Then she spoke, her voice calm, but tinged with wariness. "Mr. Caldwell, is this appropriate? I mean, what will people think?" Her words weren't a rejection, but a practical question that reflected the sharp insight Ethan had always admired. He straightened as though convincing a boardroom. "Just one evening, Sophia. You've helped organize this event for 5 years. You deserve to enjoy it." "I don't want to go alone. Not this time." Another pause, shorter this time, but enough to make Ethan feel his heart beating faster. "Thank you for the invitation." Sophia finally said, her voice gentle yet firm. "I accept." Ethan felt a warm rush in his chest, as if a door had cracked open after years of being locked. "Good," he replied, trying to keep his voice composed. "I'll send a car for you. Get some rest, Sophia." When the call ended, he sat back in his chair, staring at the untouched whiskey, and realized he was smiling a rare, genuine smile. The next morning, the atmosphere at Caldwell Technologies' Manhattan headquarters buzzed with its usual intensity. Still, Ethan could feel a subtle shift in how people looked at him as he entered the boardroom. The executives, typically focused solely on financial reports, exchanged discreet glances. Michael, the vice president, a white man with a smug smile, spoke up just as the meeting ended. "I heard you're bringing your secretary to the gala." "Bold move, Caldwell," he said, his tone playful, but his gaze sharp. Ethan clenched his hand beneath the table, but kept his expression calm. "She's my executive assistant, Michael, and my guest. Is there a problem?" Michael shrugged, his grin unchanged. "Just saying. People will talk, you know that." As the others filed out, Ethan stayed behind, looking out the window at the bustling traffic below. The rumors had begun faster than he'd expected. His phone buzzed with messages from friends and associates. "Seriously, Ethan, the assistant midlife crisis buddy." Each message was a small stab, not because they hurt him, but because they reminded him that even his simplest decisions would be dissected under the public's spotlight. He thought of Sophia, how she had accepted with cautious grace. She wasn't one to be shaken by gossip, but Ethan knew his decision might thrust her into a storm she didn't deserve. Was he being selfish, dragging her into his world, a world full of light, but also full of shadows? The question made him hesitate, but only for a moment, because for the first time in years, Ethan felt a flicker of hope that maybe with Sophia, he could find something money could never buy, someone who truly saw him not as a billionaire, but as a man. The dim light from the desk lamp in Sophia Brooks' small office illuminated her face, highlighting her warm brown skin and deep brown eyes fixed intently on the computer screen. The office, located next to Ethan Caldwell's grand executive suite at the Caldwell Technologies headquarters in Manhattan, was tidy yet cozy. A vase of white daisies sat on the desk beside a small photo frame of her and her mother at college graduation. Though the hour was late, Sophia remained at her desk reviewing the vendor list for the upcoming charity gala, determined to ensure not a single detail was overlooked. Perfection was her way of asserting her value in a world that was always ready to judge her through the lens of her skin color. But tonight, Sophia's mind wasn't entirely on her work. Ethan's invitation, spoken over the phone hours earlier, replayed in her head like a tune she couldn't shake. "I want to invite you to the gala, not as my assistant, but as my guest." His voice, usually cold and decisive in meetings, had sounded uncertain this time, as if he were venturing into unfamiliar territory. Sophia had accepted not impulsively, but because part of her was curious. Curious about the real man behind Ethan Caldwell, the man she had worked with for 5 years, but never truly understood. She stood and walked to the small mirror hanging on the wall, adjusting her natural curls tied neatly in a low bun. In the soft light, she saw a reflection of her younger self 10 years ago, a young woman raised in Harlem, where the streets rang with laughter but were steeped in hardship. Her mother, an elementary school teacher, had taught her that education was the key to rising above prejudice, and Sophia had seized that opportunity with both hands. She earned a scholarship to a prestigious university, worked part-time to pay her way, and graduated at the top of her class with a business degree. But the world beyond school hadn't welcomed her with open arms. Interviews where she was asked if she would fit the company culture, the scrutinizing looks when she walked into boardrooms, reminders that as a black woman, she had to work twice as hard to be recognized. Sophia returned to her desk, sat down, and absent-mindedly touched the photo of her mother. 5 years ago, when she accepted the job as Ethan Caldwell's executive assistant, many people had warned her, "Working for a white billionaire. You'll be his shadow," one friend had said. But Sophia saw something different in Ethan. He never acted superior, never took credit for her work, and always listened to her input with a level of respect she rarely received from others. When a rival firm tried to lure her away with nearly double the salary, she declined not because of money that had never driven her, but because she believed in Ethan's vision and the way he built a company, not just to profit, but to make a difference. And perhaps, though she wouldn't admit it, she sensed a rare sincerity in how he treated her. But the invitation to the gala changed everything. Sophia wasn't naive. She knew that stepping into the ballroom as Ethan Caldwell's famous white billionaire guest would make her the target of every gaze and whisper. Not just because she was his assistant, but because she was a black woman in a world where racial difference is often exaggerated into scandal. She could already imagine the headlines: "Billionaire Caldwell and his assistant romance or publicity stunt." She had seen how the press dissected Ethan's private life, from his failed marriage to Claire, to baseless rumors about other relationships. Did she have the strength to endure that storm? Sophia opened her laptop, but instead of continuing her work, she typed into the search bar, "Ethan Caldwell, Charity Gala." Images from previous years appeared: Ethan standing alone at the top of the marble staircase, his polite but distant smile, no one at his side. Something about those pictures made her chest tighten. She realized that although she had managed Ethan's life for 5 years, she had never truly known him. Not Ethan Caldwell the billionaire, but Ethan, the man with unspoken pain and hidden dreams. His invitation, impulsive as it may have been, was a door left ajar, and Sophia wondered if she dared to walk through it. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. David, the CFO and Ethan's close friend, poked his head in. "Still here, Sophia? You're working harder than the boss." David, a white man with a friendly smile and perpetually tousled blonde hair, was one of the few people in the company who treated her like a friend, not just an assistant. Sophia smiled. "I'm just checking a few last things. What about you? What are you doing here so late?" David stepped in and sat across from her. "I saw your office light on. I'm dropping by. Word is you're going to the gala as Ethan's guest." News traveled faster than she expected. Sophia nodded, maintaining her composure. "That's right. Mr. Caldwell invited me and I accepted." David raised an eyebrow, curious, but not judgmental. "Good for you. But you know, people will talk. They always do when Ethan does something unexpected." Sophia sighed and leaned back in her chair. "I know. and I'm not ready for what they'll say." She paused, then continued in a quieter voice. "Not just because I'm his assistant, David, but because I'm me." She didn't need to explain further. David understood. He had seen the subtle suspicion in some clients' eyes, the whispers among colleagues when she left a meeting. As a black woman in a white-dominated industry, Sophia had learned how to stand tall in the face of prejudice, but that didn't mean it didn't hurt. David leaned forward, his tone serious. "Sophia, you're the best I've ever worked with. You're smart and strong, and Ethan knows it. If he invited you, it's not because he needed someone on his arm. He invited you because he sees something in you, even if he hasn't fully realized it." His words surprised her. She had always seen Ethan as a fair boss, but the idea that he might see her as more than just an assistant made her heart beat faster. "Thank you, David," she said with a soft smile. "But I still need time to think this through." David stood and gently patted her shoulder. "Take your time, but don't let the whispers out there decide for you. You deserve to shine, Sophia." As he left, Sophia looked again at the photo of her mother, the woman who always told her she could do anything if she believed in herself. Could she think that Ethan's invitation was a chance to enter the light? Or was it just another door to the judgment she had spent her life trying to rise above the days leading up to the charity gala, passed in a whirlwind of meetings, emails, and last-minute decisions? At the Caldwell Technologies headquarters in Manhattan, the atmosphere was more energetic than usual, with executives busy preparing for the negotiations that would take place on the sidelines of the event. But for Ethan Caldwell, his mind didn't seem fully present, not in the boardroom, not with the financial charts or profit forecasts. He sat at the head of the conference table, his deep blue eyes scanning the numbers on the screen, but his thoughts drifted elsewhere toward one person, Sophia Brooks. Ethan couldn't deny that ever since he invited Sophia to the gala as his guest, he had begun noticing things about her that he had never seen. The way she tucked a curly strand of hair behind her ear when reading a document intently. Her subtle smile lit up as she gracefully handled a tough client call. The little notebook she always carried, where she jotted down everything in blue ink. Once overshadowed by her perfect professionalism, these details now stood out in Ethan's mind, like he was seeing her for the first time after 5 years of working together. Today, during a meeting with the communications team, Ethan unconsciously glanced toward Sophia, who stood in the corner of the room, babbling into the phone with an event staffer. She wore a crisp white blouse and black slacks, simple yet elegant. Her curls were tied up, revealing the graceful curve of her neck. When she looked up and met his gaze, she offered a slight smile, a professional one, but it was enough to make Ethan's heart skip a beat. He quickly looked away, reminding himself that he was her boss, that his invitation was simply a gesture of appreciation, nothing more. But deep down, he knew that wasn't entirely true. Along with this newfound curiosity, however, came a growing unease. Ethan was no fool. He knew bringing Sophia to the gala, not as his assistant, but as his guest, would spark whispers. Not just because she was his employee, but because she was a black woman in a world where interracial pairings were still scrutinized under a magnifying glass. He had seen the discreet glances from colleagues and heard the murmurs as he walked down the hall. And more than anything, he worried that his invitation might make Sophia feel obligated, that she had only accepted because he was Ethan Caldwell, the man who held sway over her career. Across the office, Sophia was wrestling with her thoughts. Sitting at her desk reviewing an email from the floral designer, her mind circled back to her conversation with David the night before. David had said that if he invited you, it was not because he needed someone to stand beside him and look good. Those words made her wonder, what did Ethan see in her? Was it respect for her work, or something more profound? And more importantly, was she ready to step into his spotlight, where every move she made would be dissected? That morning when Sophia entered the staff lounge to grab a coffee, She overheard a conversation between two colleagues, Lisa and Karen from marketing. She must be up to something. Lisa whispered, her voice laced with suspicion. Who turns down the chance to cozy up to a billionaire? Karen chuckled. She probably thinks she will be the next Mrs. Caldwell. Sophia froze, her hand tightening around the coffee cup, the words cutting like a knife. She took a deep breath, then entered the room with a composed smile, silencing them instantly as their faces flushed. "Good morning," she said, her voice soft but sharp, and she left before they could respond. Those kinds of remarks were nothing new. Sophia had grown accustomed to people questioning her motives, to being judged by the color of her skin throughout her entire career. But this time, they struck a deeper nerve. Her fear that no one would see her as Sophia Brooks, an intelligent and independent woman, but merely as the black assistant trying to climb. She wondered if agreeing to attend the gala had been a mistake, if she was putting herself in the vulnerable position she'd spent her whole life trying to avoid. That afternoon, as Sophia brought a folder into Ethan's office for him to sign, the air between them felt heavier than usual. Ethan, reviewing a contract, looked up as she entered. "Thank you, Sophia," he said, his voice warm, but his gaze lingered on her a moment too long, as if trying to read her thoughts. She set the folder on the desk, then hesitated, something rare for her. "Mr. Caldwell?" She began, her voice measured, "and we needed to talk about the gala." Ethan immediately stopped writing, put his pen down, and gave her his full attention. "Is something wrong?" he asked, a flicker of concern crossing his face. Sophia drew in a breath, standing tall, determined not to let emotion show. "People are talking, not just here but outside too. I've heard some comments from co-workers, and I don't want to cause trouble for you or the company." Her words hit Ethan like a blow. He stood and walked around the desk, approaching her, but stopped at a respectful distance. "Sophia, I invited you because I respect you, because I wanted you there as yourself, not as my assistant. But if this makes you uncomfortable, I'll understand." His voice was sincere, yet behind it was a fear he hadn't felt in years, a fear that he had pushed her into something she hadn't wanted. Sophia looked into his eyes and saw the honesty there, which surprised her. She had expected a vague, polite justification, but Ethan didn't give one. He stood before her, not as a powerful billionaire, but as a man trying to do what was right. "I'm not uncomfortable," she said, cutting herself off, then smiled softly, confident and vulnerable. "I'll go, but you need to know what they'll say. Not just about us, but about me." Ethan understood. He had seen how the world treated people like Sophia, how prejudice could twist even the best intentions. "They can say whatever they want," he replied more firmly than he felt. "But I want you to know, I don't care about that. And I hope you don't either." Sophia nodded, though her eyes still carried a trace of uncertainty. "Thank you," she said, and turned to leave, leaving Ethan with relief and apprehension. As the door closed behind her, Ethan looked out the window where Manhattan's skyscrapers glowed in the afternoon sun. He knew his invitation had not been a simple gesture. It had opened a door not just for him, but for Sophia, and now both would have to face whatever waited on the other side. But for the first time in years, Ethan felt ready to step through that door, even if he didn't know what lay beyond. The night of the charity gala at Ethan Caldwell's mansion was a dazzling tableau of opulence and power. The ballroom was magnificent, with crystal chandeliers hanging high, casting star-like glimmers across the gleaming marble floor. Bouquets of white orchids were elegantly arranged on banquet tables, draped in gold-embroidered silk, and a symphony orchestra played gentle melodies, creating a majestic and seductive atmosphere. The guests, senators, film stars, CEOs of major corporations, moved through the room, like performers on stage, their perfect smiles and polite greetings veiling quiet calculations. Ethan Caldwell stood atop the white marble staircase, his hands tucked into the pockets of a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. His dark brown hair was neatly combed, and his deep blue eyes swept across the crowd below. As a wealthy, powerful white American man, he was used to being the center of attention, but tonight, he felt a strange flutter of anticipation. Not because of the business negotiations to come, or the millions to be raised for the children's hospital, but because of the woman he was waiting for, Sophia Brooks. The invitation he had extended a few days ago, impulsive though it had been, now held a meaning he didn't fully understand. A chance to crack the wall of isolation he had built for 12 long years. The crowd below began to murmur, and Ethan sensed a shift in the atmosphere, as though the entire room was holding its breath. He looked toward the grand entrance, and time seemed to slow. Sophia walked in, and the ballroom fell silent. She wore a sapphire blue evening gown that hugged her slender figure, highlighting her warm brown skin. Her natural curls, usually tied back for work, now fell in soft waves over her shoulders, catching the light. Her deep brown eyes filled with confidence, and a hint of vulnerability scanned the room. And when they met Ethan's, a faint smile played on her lips. Ethan felt his chest tighten. At that moment, he forgot about the curious glances, the whispers already beginning to ripple through the crowd. He descended the staircase, each step steady, carrying a resolve he rarely let show. When he reached her, he couldn't help but say, "You look stunning, Sophia." His voice was low and sincere, so much so that it surprised even him. A slight blush bloomed on Sophia's cheeks, but she held his gaze unflinching. "Thank you, Ethan," she replied, calling him by his first name, for the first time in public, and the sound of it made his heart race. They stood there only steps apart, yet it felt as though the whole world was watching. Ethan extended his hand, and Sophia placed hers in his, her fingers warm and steady. As he led her into the ballroom, the whispers grew louder, like a wave moving through the crowd. Isn't that his assistant? Who is she to be standing next to Caldwell? A black woman. That's unexpected. Though veiled behind polite smiles, the words were as sharp as blades. Sophia felt the weight of every gaze, but stood tall, her head held high. She had braced herself for this, but the reality still felt like walking a tightrope. As a black woman in a room full of influential individuals, most of them white, she knew that every move she made would be analyzed from her stride to her speech. But she wasn't here to please them. She was here because of Ethan's sincere invitation, and because part of her wanted to prove that she belonged, not just as an assistant, but as herself. They hadn't gone far when a middle-aged man in a gray suit with a smug grin stepped forward. Charles Bentley, editor of the city's most notorious business tabloid, known for his scandal-chasing exposés on the private lives of the elite. Caldwell. He called out loud enough for the room to hear. "It's an interesting choice for the evening office romance." His eyes flicked to Sophia, evaluating her like a puzzle to be solved. Ethan's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Sophia stepped forward, her smile as sharp as a blade. "Mr. Bentley, we're here to support the Children's Hospital. I trust you've contributed generously to the cause tonight." One was calm, but carried an undercurrent of challenge that caught Charles off guard. He laughed loudly, clearly surprised, but unable to mask his discomfort. "Touché, Ms." Sophia Brooks finished for him, extending her hand with unshakable confidence. "A pleasure to meet you." Charles shook her hand, his grin now tinged with reluctance. "Ms. Brooks is a remarkable woman. I'll be keeping an eye on you." He nodded at Ethan and walked away. But Ethan knew the man wouldn't stop there. He'd write an article, and the headline wouldn't be about the gala or the charity, it would be about them. Ethan looked at Sophia, admiration shining in his eyes. You handled him brilliantly, he said, voice low but sincere. Sophia shrugged, her smile softer now, but still cautious. I've dealt with men like him before. They think they can rattle you, but I don't give them the win that easily. She glanced around the room where eyes were still tracking them. Still, I don't think tonight will be easy. Ethan gave her hand a light squeeze, a small gesture filled with meaning. You won't face it alone. We're in this together. As they moved deeper into the ballroom, Ethan felt Sophia's presence beside him as a quiet strength, something he'd never experienced at these events. She wasn't just his guest. She was a brilliant, confident, powerful woman, challenging every assumption in that room simply by being herself. But he also knew that tonight was only the beginning. The whispers wouldn't stop here. And when the gala lights dimmed, greater challenges would await them both. The ballroom of Ethan Caldwell's mansion still glittered under the luminous glow of the chandeliers, but the atmosphere now carried a quiet tension. After the brief confrontation with Charles Bentley, Ethan and Sophia moved through the crowd, her hand resting lightly in his, a natural and significant gesture. Curious glances and hushed whispers followed them, like waves gently but persistently lapping at the shore. Yet Ethan felt an unusual calm with Sophia beside him, as if she were the anchor holding him steady in the whirlwind of false smiles and empty greetings. The symphony orchestra stationed in a velvet-draped corner of the room shifted to a new melody, Glenn Miller's Moonlight Serenade, a slow romantic tune filled with soft saxophone notes that floated through the air. Ethan turned to Sophia, a spark of sudden thought lighting his eyes. Sophia, he said, his voice low and warm, would you like to dance? The question was simple, but both of them felt its weight. In a ballroom filled with powerful onlookers, a dance wasn't just a social gesture, but a declaration. Sophia hesitated, her deep brown eyes sweeping the dance floor where a few couples had already begun to sway with the music. She knew every eye would turn to them, that every step she took would be analyzed, not only because she was Ethan's guest, but because she was a black woman in a space that had long belonged to the white elite. But when she looked into Ethan's eyes and saw sincerity and a rare hint of nervousness, she smiled softly. All right, Ethan, she replied, calling him by name for the second time that evening, and placed her hand in his. Ethan led her to the dance floor, her hand in his, feeling familiar and new. As they began to move to the rhythm, the world around them seemed to blur. The crowd, the lights, the whispers all faded, leaving only Sophia's music and presence. She followed his steps with natural grace, her sapphire blue gown flowing gently with each turn, her warm brown skin glowing beneath the lights. Ethan couldn't take his eyes off her, feeling a connection he hadn't experienced in all his solitude. Sophia, he said, his voice quiet enough for only her to hear. I have a question. She looked up, curiosity in her eyes. Ask me. Ethan drew a breath, weighing his words. David told me you once turned down a job offer that paid nearly twice as much to stay with me. Why? The question wasn't just curiosity. It was a genuine attempt to understand the honest Sophia, the woman who had managed his life for 5 years, but remained a mystery. Sophia tilted her head slightly, a curl slipping over her forehead, and she smiled a gentle and sharp smile. Because money isn't everything, Ethan, she replied, her voice steady. I stayed because I believe in what we're building, not just a company, but real change. I see how you treat people even when no one's watching. You've never taken credit for my work. You donate millions without seeking attention. That's why I stayed. Her honest and direct words touched a place deep within Ethan, where he had long kept his emotions locked away. He gave her hand a light squeeze, not as part of the dance, but as a quiet expression of something he hadn't yet found words for. He admitted that I didn't think you noticed those things, his voice dropping lower. Sophia gave a quiet laugh, her eyes brightening. It's my job to notice, Ethan, and I always see you. At that moment in the middle of the dance floor, they were no longer boss and assistant, but two people seeing each other more clearly than ever. But the moment was interrupted by a familiar, sharp, and confident voice. Ethan Caldwell dancing. Now that's headline material. Ethan stiffened instantly, recognizing the voice. He turned to see Claire Langston, his ex-wife, standing at the edge of the dance floor wearing a sparkling silver gown, her golden hair cascading down her shoulders. Claire, now the wife of Theodore Langston, CEO of a rival tech conglomerate, still possessed the striking beauty and confidence that had once captivated Ethan 6 years ago. But her eyes, though smiling, carried a trace of jealousy that was hard to hide. Sophia felt the change in Ethan's posture, but kept her composure, her hand resting gently on his. Claire approached her gaze, flicking over Sophia, as though sizing up a rival. "And this must be Ms. Brooks," Claire said, her voice syrupy, with just a hint of mockery. "Ethan, I've heard quite a bit about you, an unexpected choice." The word unexpected was laced with implication, not just about Sophia's role, but her race. Ethan felt his blood rise, but he kept his voice even. "Claire, I didn't know you'd be here. Where's Theodore?" Claire shrugged her smile, never reaching her eyes. "Busy in Tokyo. But I couldn't pass up the chance to see you like this. She looks at you like I used to before money changed everything." Her words struck like a blade, dredging up memories of a marriage that had crumbled, of the time Claire walked away accusing Ethan of loving his empire more than her. Though she is unaware of the whole story, Sophia understands Claire's intent to provoke. She gave Ethan's hand a discreet squeeze, a silent reminder to stay composed. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Langston," Sophia said, her tone calm but edged. "I hope you enjoy the evening and support the cause." Her words were courteous, but the subtle challenge in her delivery made Claire raise an eyebrow, clearly not expecting such confidence. Claire gave a small laugh, but her eyes remained cold. "Of course, Ms. Brooks. I'll let you two continue dancing." She turned away, but Ethan knew this encounter had been no accident. Claire had always known how to complicate things, and he feared she wouldn't stop at one biting remark. He looked at Sophia and saw that her gaze was still steady, unshaken by the interruption. "Are you all right?" he asked, softly. Sophia smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her entire face. "I've dealt with women like her my whole life, Ethan. Don't worry." Her strong and sincere words stirred a deep admiration in Ethan. As the orchestra played on, they returned to the rhythm, and though Claire still lingered somewhere in the crowd, Ethan saw only Sophia, the woman who was quietly breaking down the walls he had spent years building one step at a time. The morning after the charity gala, early sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Caldwell Technologies' Manhattan headquarters, glinting off the polished granite floors. But the mood inside the office was heavy, as if the whispers from the ballroom the night before had followed Ethan Caldwell and Sophia Brooks into the building. Ethan entered the lobby wearing a charcoal gray suit that hugged his tall frame, his dark brown hair neatly combed, but his deep blue eyes betrayed tension. As a white American billionaire, he was used to scrutiny, but this time the attention wasn't just on him. It was on the woman who had stood beside him the night before. When the elevator opened on the executive floor, Ethan immediately noticed the sidelong glances from employees. A few lowered their heads, pretending to be absorbed in paperwork, while others exchanged hushed words as he passed. He entered his office, shut the door behind him, and checked his phone. The screen lit up with dozens of notifications, and his heart sank at the headline from a significant business tabloid. "Billionaire Caldwell, in love with employee scandal or romance. Beneath it was a photo taken outside Sophia's apartment the night before showing Ethan leaning in to kiss her goodnight. Though only part of her face was visible, anyone who knew her would recognize her immediately. The article quoted anonymous sources from the Gala, speculating that Sophia was a gold digger or Ethan was experiencing a midlife crisis. Ethan clenched his phone, a wave of anger and guilt washing over him. He had expected attention, but not such swift and brutal attacks. He immediately texted Sophia, "Have you seen the news? I'm so sorry." Seconds later, she replied, "I saw it. Don't worry, I'm fine." But Ethan couldn't stop worrying. Sophia didn't deserve this, not for his impulsive decision. In the small office next door, Sophia Brooks sat at her desk. The vase of white daisies still looked fresh, but her mood did not. She wore a navy blue business dress, her curls neatly tied back as usual, but her deep brown eyes were tired. As a Black American woman, she was no stranger to judgment. But the article that morning, with its veiled insinuations that she was exploiting Ethan, struck a deep and familiar wound. She reread a passage. A Black assistant and a white billionaire, just a publicity stunt. Each word landed like a blade, reminding her that to many she would never be Sophia, but always the Black woman. The silence was palpable when Sophia entered the meeting room to deliver documents for the morning meeting. A few colleagues like Lisa from marketing quickly looked away, while others exchanged knowing glances. "Good morning," Sophia said, her voice calm, but she could feel the shift. Just days ago, she had been respected for her professionalism. Now she was the woman from the article. She returned to her office, shut the door, and leaned against the wall, taking a deep breath to steady herself. By noon, an email from Human Resources appeared in Sophia's inbox, requesting an urgent meeting with her and Ethan that afternoon. She wasn't surprised. Caldwell Technologies had strict policies about relationships between managers and direct reports, and even though nothing official existed between her and Ethan, the public narrative had forced the company's hand. Sophia knocked on Ethan's office door, carrying a stack of documents to mask the actual reason for her visit. As she entered, she saw him standing at the window, gazing down at the traffic below, his expression tense. "Sophia," Ethan said. As soon as he saw her, his voice filled with concern. "I'm so sorry about the article. I didn't expect them to go this far." Sophia gave a faint smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's not your fault, Ethan. We both knew this could happen." She placed the documents on his desk, then continued, her tone careful. "HR wants to meet with us this afternoon. It's definitely about this." Ethan nodded. He had expected it. He stepped toward her but kept a respectful distance. "What do you think they'll ask for?" Sophia was direct as always. "According to the police, I'd have to transfer departments or report to someone else. I want to stay in my role, but report to David instead of you." She paused, overseeing him. "It'll make things clearer." Ethan felt an inexplicable sense of loss, though he knew it was the logical solution. Sophia had been an indispensable part of his life for 5 years, and the thought of her no longer working directly with him left him hollow. But he also saw the strength in her eyes, the determination not to let public judgment define her. "If that's what you want, I support you," he said, voice low but resolute. "But Sophia, I need you to know I don't regret inviting you. Not because of what they wrote." Sophia looked at him, her gaze softening. "I don't regret it either, Ethan, but I need time to adjust." She smiled genuinely this time and left his office, leaving Ethan with deep admiration and helplessness. He wanted to shield her from the articles and stares, but he knew Sophia didn't need a hero. She had always faced the world on her terms, and that only made him respect her more. The HR meeting was brief but tense. Elaine, the head of HR, A composed white woman in her 50s explained the policy. Effective tomorrow, Ms. Brooks will report directly to Mr. David Harrison, CFO, to avoid a conflict of interest. Both parties must sign this public disclosure form. Mr. Caldwell, you'll be recused from any decisions regarding Ms. Brooks' compensation or promotion. Ethan and Sophia signed the paperwork, but the mood in the room felt like something precious, being reduced to black and white print. As they left the meeting room, Ethan walked beside Sophia, wanting to say something to ease the moment. But she spoke first. Ethan, we'll get through this. We don't let them shake what we know is real. Her words, strong and sincere, made Ethan stop in his tracks. He looked at her and saw not just a bright and resilient woman, but someone who could anchor him when everything else was unraveling. You're right, he replied quietly, and I won't let them hurt you. But when they returned to the office, a message from David popped up on Ethan's phone. Be careful, Claire's spreading rumors that Sophia's why. Theodore pulled his investment. Company stock is fluctuating. Ethan's fists clenched. He knew the storm was only beginning. He looked through the glass, saw Sophia at her desk calmly working, and made a silent vow no matter what the world said, he would stand beside her. Not as a billionaire, but as a man learning how to love. Sophia Brooks' small apartment sat on the 7th floor of a red brick building in Brooklyn, modest but cozy, with bookshelves crammed full of novels and a large window overlooking the bustling street below. Tonight the glow of the street lamps filtered through the curtains, casting soft shadows across her face as she sat in her armchair, a cup of cold chamomile tea resting on the table beside her. Her natural curls, usually tied back during work hours, now fell loosely around her shoulders, and her deep brown eyes were fixed on her phone screen, where venomous social media comments were flooding in like a storm. It's just another black gold digger trying to climb. Does she think she can be Mrs. Caldwell? Caldwell's pulling a PR stunt? The words, anonymous yet sharp, pierced Sophia like needles. As a black American woman, she was no stranger to prejudice, from side glances in boardrooms to subtle insinuations during job interviews. But this time, the attacks weren't just about her work or competence. They targeted her personhood, her relationship with Ethan Caldwell, and her race. Each comment was a reminder that in the eyes of many, she was never allowed to be just Sophia Brooks. Her skin color always framed her. Sophia turned off her phone, set it down on the table, and leaned back in the chair, closing her eyes. The headline from that morning, accompanied by a photo of her and Ethan outside this apartment, still haunted her. She remembered the moment clearly, Ethan's gentle goodnight kiss, the warmth of his presence against the chill of the night, a private moment stolen and twisted into tabloid fodder. She didn't blame Ethan. He apologized immediately, and she saw sincerity in his eyes. But she couldn't stop wondering, was this fledgling relationship worth the cost of the peace she had spent years building? Memories flooded back, carrying her to Harlem, where she had grown up in a small apartment with her mother, a public school teacher, who taught her she could do anything if she believed in herself. Those years hadn't been easy. Rent was always a burden, and she still remembered neighbors' scornful looks when she won an elite university scholarship. "Do you think you're better than us?" someone once said. Sophia had never thought that. She only wanted to prove that she was worthy, and that her skin color did not define her value. But now, standing beside Ethan, a white American billionaire, she felt like she'd been dragged onto a stage she never auditioned for with every eye-casting judgment. She stood and walked to the window, looking down at the street still alive, with late-night pedestrians. Her thoughts returned to the Gala, to the moment dancing under the chandeliers, when Ethan asked why she had turned down a higher-paying job to stay. Her answer, "Because money isn't everything," was true, but not the whole truth. She had stayed because she saw in Ethan a man who was not just wealthy, but principled, who treated her not as an invisible assistant, but as a valued colleague. But was that enough? Enough to face the media storm? Enough to endure being labeled an opportunist? The doorbell rang, breaking her train of thought. She frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone this late. Peeking through the peephole, she saw David Harrison, Caldwell Technologies CFO, and Ethan's longtime friend, standing there, with a friendly smile and a bag of donuts. Sophia opened the door, managing a faint smile. David donuts at this hour. David shrugged his blonde hair tousled as always. I saw your lights on. Maybe you could use some company. Or at least a chocolate donut. They sat at the small dining table, the donut bag between them, and Sophia told David about the comments she had read the article and her fear that she was losing herself in the chaos. David listened without interrupting, his eyes full of empathy. Sophia, he said, when she finished, you know, I've worked with Ethan since the company was just a startup in a garage, right? She nodded, curious. One time, 2 years in, we nearly went bankrupt. A major investor offered to buy us out enough money to live comfortably for the rest of our lives. I wanted to sell, but Ethan said no. He said he believed in his vision, that we were building something bigger than money. Sophia tilted her head, her expression softening. Why are you telling me this? David smiled, picking up a donut but not eating it. Because Ethan doesn't give up easily. Sophia, not on the company, and I'd bet not on you. He didn't invite you to that gala because he needed arm candy. He invited you because he sees you not the assistant you. But I also understand why you're scared. The world isn't easy for people like you. David's words struck a chord deep inside Sophia. He didn't pretend racial bias didn't exist, but he also didn't let her drown in fear. David, I don't know if I have the strength to keep going, she admitted, her voice low. Every day I wake up, there's another article, another comment. I've spent my life proving I'm not who they think I am. And now I feel like I'm losing. David leaned forward, his voice serious. You're not losing, Sophia. You're doing what most people don't dare to, standing up and being yourself even when the world tries to tear you down. But you don't have to do it alone. Ethan's there, and so am I. He paused, then chuckled softly. And if it helps, I can bring more donuts anytime. Sophia laughed for the first time that day, and the heaviness in her chest lightened just a little. Thank you, David, she said sincerely. I needed that. David stood and gently patted her shoulder. Think about Ethan. Okay? He's not perfect, but he's real, and I think you are too. As he left, Sophia looked at the bag of donuts on the table and felt a flicker of hope for the first time in days. She didn't have to decide everything tonight, but she knew one thing: she wouldn't let whispers define her relationship with Ethan. Not when she was finally beginning to see him. Not just as a billionaire, but as a man she might be able to love. Drizzle fell gently outside the window of Sophia Brooks' office at Caldwell Technologies headquarters, the raindrops sliding down the glass, reflecting the neon lights of Manhattan. Sophia sat at her desk, where a vase of white chrysanthemums had begun to wilt, a few petals fallen almost as if mirroring her mood. It had been a week since the charity gala, and the media pressure hadn't subsided. New articles kept surfacing with headlines like Love or Strategy, Caldwell's assistant sparks controversy, and vicious comments aimed at her not only because she was Ethan's assistant, but also because she was a black woman. But what weighed most heavily on Sophia's mind was the message from David Harrison the previous week, informing her that Theodore Langston, Claire's husband, Claire being Ethan's ex-wife, had withdrawn a significant investment from the company's expansion project, causing stock fluctuations. Sophia knew Theodore's decision wasn't just business. Claire, with her influence, was using Ethan and Sophia's relationship as a weapon to wound. Every time Sophia thought about Ethan's company, something he had spent his entire life building suffering because of her. A dull ache settled in her chest. She looked through the glass into Ethan's office, where he was in a meeting with the executives. His face looked tense, but he still maintained his usual calm composure. As a white American billionaire, Ethan was used to pressure, but Sophia didn't want to be the reason he lost what he had worked so hard to build. She took a deep breath, stood up, and knocked on Ethan's door after the meeting ended. He looked up, his deep blue eyes lighting up at the sight of her, but that light quickly shifted into concern when he saw the seriousness in her face. "Sophia, what's going on?" he asked, his voice warm and low. Sophia stepped in, closed the door, and sat in the chair across from his desk. "Ethan," she began cautiously, "we need to talk about what's happening to us." Ethan leaned forward, hands clasped together on the desk, as if bracing for a complex negotiation. He said, "The media's being outrageous, but we'll get through it. I'll hire the best PR team to handle this." Sophia shook her head, a faint, sad smile crossing her lips. "It's not just the media, Ethan. Your company is being affected." Theodore pulled out the stock. "Fluctuates. I know Claire is behind this. I don't want to be the reason you lose everything you've built." Ethan clenched his fists, his voice tightening. "Sophia, this isn't your fault. Claire is playing dirty, and Theodore is her pawn. The company will be fine. I've dealt with worse." But Sophia didn't let him continue. "I know you're strong, Ethan, but I need to be strong for myself too. I need time to think about us and whether I can live in this spotlight. I'm suggesting we take a break, 1 month apart." Her words hit Ethan like a punch. He stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city now fading in the rain. "A break," he repeated, voice low, as if he couldn't believe it. "Sophia, I don't want to lose you." Sophia stood and moved closer to him, but didn't touch him. "I'm not saying forever," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I need to know that this is worth it, that I can be myself beside you without the world defining who I am. And I want you to be sure too." Ethan turned to face her, his eyes filled with pain, but also with respect. He wanted to argue to convince her that they could face everything together, but he saw the determination in her eyes, the resilience he had always admired. "If that's what you need," he finally said, his voice hoarse, "I'll wait, however long it takes." Sophia nodded, her eyes glistening with tears, but she kept her smile. "Thank you, Ethan. 1 month and we'll talk again." As Sophia left the office, Ethan stood there feeling like a part of him had walked out with her. He looked out the window, watching the rain fall harder, and for the first time in years he felt powerless, not in front of a business deal, but in front of the woman who had become the most essential part of his life. During that month, Sophia worked to regain her balance. She enrolled in an online writing course, a dream she had shelved since college. Sitting in her small Brooklyn apartment with her laptop and a cup of chamomile tea, she began writing about her experiences growing up in Harlem, facing racial prejudice, and finding herself amid the media storm. The pages weren't just an outlet. They helped her confront her fear of judgment, the fear that she wasn't good enough for someone like Ethan. But through every word she realized she didn't need to be good enough for anyone. She just needed to be herself. She also kept her distance from Ethan at the company, only communicating via email or through David, who had become her direct supervisor. But her heart tightened every time she caught a glimpse of Ethan in the hallway in his perfect suit, and with that faraway look in his eyes. She wondered if he felt as hollow as she did, or if he had come to see that maybe she didn't belong in his world. Meanwhile, Ethan existed in a half-awake haze. His private house, a modest place on the outskirts of New York that few people knew about, now felt colder than ever. No more evenings imagining Sophia. No more moments when her smile lit up the entire room. He buried himself in work negotiating with new investors to make up for Theodore's withdrawal. But even business victories couldn't fill the emptiness inside him. One evening, David stopped by Ethan's house with a beer and a worried look. David said, "You look like you've lost your whole world sinking into the couch." Ethan shrugged, holding the beer bottle but not drinking. "Maybe I have," he admitted. David leaned forward, voice serious. "Sophia needs time, Ethan, but she hasn't given up on you. I see how she looks at you even now. Don't let the fear of losing her make you walk away." David's words gave Ethan pause. He looked out the window where the rain was still falling and wondered whether 1 month would be enough for Sophia to find her answer, or whether he had already lost her forever. All he knew was that he was willing to wait, not because he was Ethan Caldwell the billionaire, but because he was Ethan the man who had found light in the darkness thanks to Sophia. Ethan Caldwell's private house, tucked away in a quiet suburb of New York, was modest compared to the lavish mansion he used for events. With pale gray walls, wooden bookshelves packed with novels and business titles, and a small fireplace casting a warm glow. This was the place where Ethan could be himself, not the billionaire Caldwell. But for the past 4 weeks, since Sophia Brooks had asked for a break, it had become a space where every corner reminded him of her, her subtle smile, the warmth in her voice when she said his name, and the presence that had made him feel more alive than ever. Tonight, Ethan sat on the sofa, a glass of whiskey on the table, untouched, his eyes fixed on the fire in the hearth. It had been nearly a month since that heartbreaking conversation in the office when Sophia had asked for time to think about their relationship. He had respected her decision and kept his distance from the company, communicating only through email or David Harrison, her new direct supervisor. But his heart ached every time he caught a glimpse of her in the hallway, with her neatly tied curls and professional poise. He wondered whether she was finding the peace she needed, or if she had realized that his world, with the media prejudice and pressure, was too complex for her to be part of. The clock on the wall struck 9 p.m., and Ethan looked at his phone, debating whether he should text Sophia. Tomorrow marked the final day of the 1 month she had requested, but he wasn't sure whether he should wait for her to reach out or take the initiative. As a white American billionaire, Ethan was used to being in control of billion-dollar deals of his daily schedule. But with Sophia, he felt powerless, as if his happiness rested entirely in someone else's hands. The sudden chime of the doorbell startled him. He frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone, especially not at this house, which only a few close people knew about. He walked to the door, peered through the peephole, and his heart skipped a beat when he saw Sophia standing there wearing a deep blue wool coat, her curls slightly damp from the rain, and a small fabric bag slung over her shoulder. Her dark brown eyes, both confident and hesitant, looked straight at him through the door. "Sophia," he uttered, opening the door immediately, his voice full of disbelief. "Hi, Ethan," she said, a faint smile on her lips. "I know it's not a pretty whole month, but I couldn't wait any longer." Her voice trembled slightly, but a quiet determination sent a wave of warmth through Ethan's chest. "Come in," he said, stepping aside, still in awe that she was here. Sophia stepped inside, bringing with her the scent of rain and soft perfume. And as she removed her coat, Ethan noticed she was carrying a leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with handwritten words. They sat on the sofa, the firelight casting soft shadows across Sophia's warm brown skin. "I've been thinking a lot," she began, her voice steady but full of emotion. "About us, about what the media says, about how the world sees me, a black woman standing next to you, a white billionaire. I was afraid I'd lose myself, that whispers and headlines define me. But over these 4 weeks I realized something." She paused and looked him in the eye, her gaze glowing. "I miss you, Ethan. Not the spotlight, not the galas or the mansion, but you. The man who listens to me, respects me, and makes me feel seen." Ethan felt his throat tighten. He leaned in, wanting to reach for her, but holding back, honoring her space. "Sophia," he said, his voice husky, "I thought I'd lost you. These 4 weeks have been the longest of my life. I don't care about the media, Claire, or anyone else. I want you, not as my assistant, but as the woman I—" He stopped and took a breath. "As the woman I love. I've loved you long, but was too blind to see it." His confession washed over Sophia like a warm breeze. She smiled, her eyes shimmering with tears, and handed him the leather-bound notebook. "I wrote this during the past few weeks," she said. "Part journal, part short story about a woman searching for her place in a world that doesn't want her to shine. It helped me realize I don't have to choose between being myself and being with you. I can do both if we do it together." Ethan took the notebook, his fingers gliding across the leather, sensing the weight of her words within. "You're incredible, Sophia," he said, voice full of admiration. "And I want to be with you, not just today, but always. But I need to know you're sure." Sophia smiled, a radiant smile that lit up the entire room. "I'm sure, Ethan, but I have one condition." "Anything," he replied, instantly, eyes locked on hers. Sophia leaned in closer, her voice serious but playfully firm. "No running when things get hard. No letting the media or anyone come between us. We face everything together as a team." Ethan took her hand, her slender fingers tightening around his. "The deal," he said firmly. "I promise, Sophia." At that moment, they were no longer boss and assistants defined by race or status. They were Ethan and Sophia, two souls who had found each other in the storm. Ethan leaned in and kissed her gently and profoundly, carrying the weight of a shared future. Sophia returned the kiss, feeling all her fears and doubts dissolve in his embrace. As they pulled apart, she rested her head on his shoulder, the fireplace still burning its glow, a symbol of the new fire igniting in their hearts. Outside, the rain still fell, but in that home, Ethan felt whole for the first time in years. He looked at Sophia, the woman who had changed his life, and knew that they would face it together, no matter what the world threw at them. "I love you, Sophia," he whispered, and she smiled, replying, "I love you too, Ethan, even if you are a stubborn billionaire." The months following the reunion at Ethan Caldwell's private home unfolded like a melody full of crescendos and quiet lulls. With its dazzling skyscrapers and ceaseless rhythm, New York City became the backdrop for Ethan and Sophia Brooks' journey of building love. But love, no matter how passionate, is not immune to the cold winds of media scrutiny, social prejudice, and the stark differences between the world of a white American billionaire and that of a black American woman who had once been his assistant. With his silver-streaked dark brown hair and deep blue eyes, Ethan remained the center of attention at Caldwell Technologies. But now he entered the office with a new calmness, a subtle smile when he received a message from Sophia. They created a new routine dinners at Ethan's private house, where they cooked together, though Ethan often burned something weekend walks in the park, or watching old movies, Sophia's favorite pastime. These honest but straightforward moments were the medicine that helped Ethan rediscover himself, not as the lonely billionaire on the Gala staircase, but as a man grounded in something real. With her warm brown skin and natural curls, Sophia left her role as Ethan's assistant to pursue her dream. She founded a small event consulting company, using her 5 years of experience with Ethan to organize charity programs and conferences. It wasn't an easy decision leaving behind a stable job to start overcoming risks, especially under the constant watch of the media. Articles titled, "Caldwell's Assistant Launches Startup Love or Ambition." She continued to circulate, implying she was taking advantage of Ethan. But Sophia remained steadfast, focusing on her work and her belief that she could make her own mark. However, the pressure didn't only come from outside. One morning in her new Brooklyn office, a client, the director of a nonprofit, refused to sign a contract after asking if she was too busy with her personal life to focus on work. Sophia realized the question wasn't just about scheduling her relationship with Ethan and the biases surrounding her skin color. She responded professionally, "I guarantee the quality of my work and my portfolio speaks for itself." She won the contract in the end, but the moment reminded her that the world was still ready to judge her, not just as a businesswoman, but as a black woman in love with a powerful white man. Ethan, meanwhile, faced his challenges. Claire Langston, his ex-wife, continued to spread rumors that he was distracted because of his relationship with Sophia, causing two potential investors to hesitate to join the company's expansion project. During one board meeting, David Harrison, his longtime friend and CFO, stood up in defense. "Revenue is up 15%, this quarter the highest in 3 years, David said firmly. "If anyone thinks Ethan is distracted, they should look at the numbers again." David's support didn't just relieve Ethan of pressure, it reminded him that he wasn't alone. David also became a close friend to Sophia, frequently stopping by her office with coffee and advice. One rainy afternoon, as Sophia shared the story of the discriminatory client, David listened, and then said, "You remind me of Ethan when he started never letting anyone tell him what he couldn't do. You and he are more alike than you think." His words made Sophia smile, reinforcing her belief that she and Ethan could overcome anything, as long as they faced it together. One evening at Ethan's house, as they cooked pasta with Sophia in charge, and Ethan clumsily chopping onions, Sophia received a message from a reporter requesting an interview about life with billionaire Caldwell. She sighed and set her phone down. "They never stop, do they?" she said, her voice weary. Ethan paused, wiped his hands, and pulled her into his arms. He said warmly that they'll stop when they realize we don't care. "Sophia, I know this world isn't easy on you, but I promise I'll do everything I can to protect you." Sophia leaned into him, feeling the safety in his embrace, but she knew she didn't need Ethan to protect her. She needed him as her partner. "I don't want you to protect me, Ethan," she said, looking up at him. "I want us to fight together. I'm strong, but I'm stronger with you by my side." Ethan smiled and kissed her forehead. "Deal. We're a team." The challenges kept coming. At a dinner with Ethan's business partners, a drunken executive commented that Sophia was lucky to be with Ethan. Sophia responded sharply, "I think Mr. Caldwell is lucky I organized everything for him for 5 years." The table erupted in laughter, but Ethan took her hand under the table, his eyes filled with pride. That moment reminded them that no matter how the world tried to divide them, they were stronger when they stood together. Gradually, the media lost interest once no scandals were left to exploit. Sophia secured more contracts, establishing her name in the events industry. Inspired by Sophia's spirit, Ethan expanded the company's charity programs, focusing on education for underprivileged children, an idea Sophia had once shared. One afternoon, as they visited a learning center funded by the company, Sophia watched Ethan chatting with the children and realized that he wasn't just the man she loved. He was the man she admired. As winter arrived, covering New York in soft white snow, Ethan and Sophia sat by the fireplace in his home, sharing a bottle of wine. "You've changed me, Sophia," Ethan said quietly. "I used to think work was everything, but now I know what truly matters." Sophia smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "You've changed me too, Ethan. I used to think I didn't belong in your world, but now I know I belong wherever you are." Outside, the snow fell gently, but they felt a warmth. Nothing could break in that room. They had faced the media prejudice and their differences to build a love that was not just romantic, but resilient. And as Ethan held Sophia's hand, he knew this journey, no matter how difficult, was the most precious thing he had ever had. Ethan Caldwell's hilltop mansion in the suburbs of New York once again shimmered under the lights of the annual charity gala. The grand ballroom adorned with sparkling crystal chandeliers like stars, pure white orchids on silk gold tablecloths, and a live symphony playing gentle melodies created an elegant and warm setting. But this year, the air was neither tense nor filled with whispered doubts like the previous year. The crowd, senators, celebrities, and CEOs still gathered, but they now looked toward the white marble staircase with genuine respect, awaiting the appearance of Ethan Caldwell and the woman who had changed him. Ethan stood atop the staircase, wearing a tailored black tuxedo, his dark brown hair neatly combed, his deep blue eyes lit with a rare joy. As a white American billionaire, he had once stood here feeling alone, like an actor playing the role of host in an endless performance. But beside him stood Sophia Brooks, the woman who had brought light into his life. Sophia, with her warm brown skin and natural curls cascading freely, wore a pearl green evening gown, highlighting her graceful beauty. Her dark brown eyes looked at Ethan, a radiant smile on her lips, and her hand held him with unwavering certainty. "Ready, Mr. Caldwell?" Sophia teased, echoing the question she had asked a year ago. Ethan smiled, gently squeezing her hand. "More than ever, Miss Brooks," he replied, his voice low and warm. They descended the stairs together, and the crowd responded with soft applause, not out of curiosity or scandal, but because they saw something genuine in this couple. A love that had weathered media storms, prejudice, and racial differences. The past year had proven that Ethan and Sophia weren't a fleeting story, but a lasting bond forged in fire. Over the past year, Sophia has established herself as a successful entrepreneur. Her event consulting firm, though small, had organized numerous charity galas and conferences, earning her respect in the industry. No longer seen as Caldwell's assistant, she was now Sophia Brooks, an intelligent, resilient, and passionate woman. But the journey hadn't been easy. She still faced judgmental glances and insinuations that her success came from Ethan. She responded with results every time, and Ethan stood by her not to shield her, but as her partner, just as they had promised. Ethan, on his part, had found a balance between business and personal life. Inspired by Sophia, he expanded Caldwell Technologies' charitable initiatives, focusing on education for underprivileged children. He no longer defined himself solely by billion-dollar deals. He was a man in love, a friend, and someone who wanted to leave a legacy beyond money. He wasn't naive, though. Claire Langston, his ex-wife, continued to stir trouble through rumors, but with support from David Harrison and the PR team. Ethan weathered it all, proving that his company was stronger than ever. David, with tousled blonde hair and his trademark friendly smile, greeted them at the bottom of the stairs, clapping Ethan on the back. He said, "Another successful event." My friend then glanced at Sophia with a playful twinkle. "And I still claim credit for bringing you two together, right?" Sophia laughed, shaking her head. "Keep dreaming, David, but thank you for everything." David shrugged, his eyes gleaming with pride. He had witnessed their journey, from its uncertain beginnings to this moment, and knew Ethan and Sophia were meant to be. As they moved through the ballroom, stopping to greet guests, Ethan noticed the difference from the previous year. No more judgmental stares or hushed gossip. Instead, there was respect, even admiration, for the couple who had faced it all. Sophia conversed with the senator about education policy, her voice confident and sharp, making it impossible for Ethan to take his eyes off her. He wondered how he had ever failed to see her for who she was during those 5 years she worked for him, this brilliant, strong, and stunning woman. The orchestra began to play Moonlight Serenade, the song that had brought them together a year ago. Ethan didn't hesitate. He extended his hand. "Dance with me, Sophia," he asked, his voice low and full of feeling. Sophia smiled and placed her hand in his. "Always, Ethan." They glided onto the dance floor, moving to the rhythm, and the entire room seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them, just like that first night. But this time, there was no fear or doubt, only love and certainty. Mid-dance, Ethan stopped suddenly, surprising Sophia. He knelt before her in front of hundreds of guests and pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. The crowd fell silent. Sophia covered her mouth, her eyes brimming with tears. "Sophia Brooks." Ethan said, his voice steady yet full of emotion. "You've changed my life. You've taught me that love isn't something money can buy, but worth fighting for. You would make me the happiest man if you agreed to be my wife. Will you marry me?" Sophia laughed through her tears, her voice trembling yet glowing. "Yes, Ethan, but only if you promise never to try cooking again." Laughter echoed through the room, breaking the tension, and Ethan chuckled as he stood and slid the diamond ring onto her finger. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her as the crowd applauded, not for a scandal, but for a love that had triumphed over every obstacle. David, standing at the edge of the dance floor, raised a glass of champagne and shouted, "Told you! You two were always meant to be!" Sophia glanced his way, laughing, then leaned into Ethan, feeling his warmth. She remembered standing on this very dance floor a year ago, terrified of being judged a black woman beside a white billionaire. Now she knew that people weren't just judging, they were watching, and many had changed just as she and Ethan had changed each other. As the music ended, Ethan whispered into her ear, "Thank you for choosing me, Sophia." She looked up, her eyes bright. "Thank you for seeing me, Ethan." They left the dance floor hand in hand, and as they crossed the ballroom, Sophia felt a newfound confidence. She was no longer just Sophia Brooks, the entrepreneur, or Ethan Caldwell's fiancée. She was entirely herself, and that was enough to face whatever came next. Outside, New York remained bustling as ever. But inside that room, Ethan and Sophia had found a world of their own, not defined by wealth, race, or the spotlight, but by enduring love, built daily through respect, sacrifice, and faith.